chapter entitled Battle for Bombay. Actually, even Prabhupada's disciples were having difficulty understanding Prabhupada's unbreakable determination. Prabhupada's main motive was to preach Krishna consciousness in Bombay. Srila Prabhupada said, "My Guru Maharaj ordered me to preach Krishna consciousness in the West, and I have done that. Now I want to preach in India." Bombay was the most important city in India, the gateway. And within Bombay, Krishna had somehow led Srila Prabhupada to this land where he had begun preaching and had brought the deities of Radha and Krishna. In Prabhupada's eyes, the land was suitable for the large, gorgeous temple and international hotel he had planned. Bombay was an important city and required grand temple worship, large festivals, mass prasadam distribution, and a variety of Vedic cultural programs. The Juhu land seemed ideal for a school, a theater, a library, apartments, a Hare Krishna city. So how could Prabhupada retreat from this rogue who was trying to cheat him? There would always be persons opposed to Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada said, but that did not mean the devotee should give in. A preacher had to be tolerant, and sometimes when all else failed, and Krishna's interest was at stake, he had to fight. Another reason Prabhupada refused to give up this particular plot of land was that he had promised the deities Radha Ras Bihari. He had invited Krishna here and prayed, "Dear sir, please stay here, and I will build you a beautiful temple." When Prabhupada had been touring and a devotee from Bombay had written him that the deities were being neglected, Prabhupada had written back, insisting that these abominable activities be rectified. The deity of Krishna was not a stone statue, but was actually Krishna, eager to reciprocate with his sincere devotee. So if using the land for missionary work was the obvious or external reason for Prabhupada's determination to keep his Hare Krishna land, the internal reason was his personal commitment to their lordships, Sri Sri Radha Rasabihari. Certainly, Mr. N and his associates could never understand this. Even Prabhupada's own disciples could not realize it fully. Prabhupada had brought Radha and Krishna into very poor conditions, but with the promise of something wonderful to come. At his request, Radha and Krishna had come, and they were standing patiently giving eternal benediction to their worshippers, while Srila Prabhupada struggled to fulfill his promise. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Varadari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Varadari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari, Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana, Yashodana Braja Jana Ranjana, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Tira Vanachari, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Radha Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Dava Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Shri Radha Girdhari ki Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki Jai Shri Gaurnitai ki Jai Shri Prabhupada Nitai Gaur Preman Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Vadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nayasti. Hare Krishna. Today we continue with Srimad Bhagavatam, reading from 5th Canto, chapter 24, text 26 to 29. This is in prose. Tasya Mahanubhavasyanupatam Amrjita Kasayako Vasmat Vidaha Parihina Bhagavat Anugraha Upajigam Misatiti. Go into the word for word translation. Tasya of Prahlad Maharaj, Maha Anubhavasya, who was an exalted devotee, Anupatam, the path, Amrijita Kasaya, a person who is materially contaminated. Kaha, what? Va, or Asmat Vidaha, like us. Parihina Bhagavat Anugraha, being without the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Upajigamisati, desires to follow. Iti, thus. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Bhaya Charanarvinda, Bhaktivedanta Swami. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Please hear the translation. Bali Maharaj said, persons like us who are still attached to material enjoyment, who are contaminated by the modes of material nature, and who lack the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, cannot follow the supreme path of Prahlad Maharaj, the exalted devotee of the Lord. Purport. It is said that for spiritual realization, one must follow great personalities like Lord Brahma, Devarshi Narada, Lord Shiva, and Prahlad Maharaj. The path of bhakti is not at all difficult if we follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas and authorities. But those who are too materially contaminated by the modes of material nature cannot follow them. Although Bali Maharaj was actually following the path of his grandfather, because of his great humility, he thought that he was not. It is characteristic of advanced Vaishnavas following the principles of bhakti that they think themselves ordinary human beings. This is not an artificial exhibition of humility. A Vaishnava sincerely thinks this way and therefore never admits his exalted position. Text 27. Tasyanucharitam uparishtad vishtarishyate yasya bhagavan swayam akila jagat guru narayanu dhvari gadapane pani avatishtate nija jananukampita hridayo yena gustena pada dasa kandaro yojanayutayutam digvijay uchatite. Sukadev Goswami continued, my dear king, how shall I glorify the character of Bali Maharaj, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master of the three worlds, who is most compassionate to his own devotee, stands with club in hand at Bali Maharaj's door. When Ravana, the powerful demon, came to gain victory over Bali Maharaj, Vamanadev kicked him a distance of 80,000 miles with his big toe. I shall explain the character and activities of Bali Maharaj later in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Tato destat talatale mayo nama dhanavendras tripuradipatir bhagavata puranina trilokasham chikirshuna nidhagda swapuratrasya tatprasada labdho pado Maya Vinam Acharyo Mahadevena Parirakshito Vigata Sudarshana Bhayo Mahiyate. Beneath the planet known as Sutala is another planet called Talatal, which is ruled by the Danava demon named Maya. Maya is known as the Acharya of all the Mayavis, who can invoke the powers of sorcery. For the benefit of the three worlds, Lord Shiva, who is known as Tripurari, once set fire to the three kingdoms of Maya, but later, being pleased with him, returned his kingdom. Since that time, Maya Danava has been protected by Lord Shiva. Therefore, he falsely thinks that he need not fear the Sudarshan Chakra of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tato dashtan mahatale kadraveyanam satparnam naikashishram krodhavasho nama ghana kuhakat takshaka kaliya sushanyadi pradhana mahabhogavanta patitri rajadipeta purushavahad anavartam Udvijamana swa kalatra patya suhut kudumba sangena kvachit pramatta viharanti. The planetary system below Talatal is known as Mahatal. it is abode of many hooded snakes, descendants of Kadru, who are always very angry. The great snakes who are prominent are Kuhaka, Takshaka, Kaliya, and Shushena. The snakes in Mahatal are always disturbed by fear of Garuda, the carrier of Lord Vishnu. But although they are full of anxiety, some of them nevertheless sport with their wives, children, friends, and relatives. Purport, it is stated here that the snakes who live in the planetary system known as Mahatal are very powerful and have many hoods. They live with their wives and children and consider themselves happy, although they are always full of anxiety because of Garuda, who comes to destroy them. This is the way of material life. Even if one lives in the most abominable condition, he still thinks himself happy with his wife, children, friends, and relatives. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavascha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Sha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaskute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Padaya, Krishna Krishna. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prishtabhati, Shivri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namni. Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pracharani, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyati Devatarani. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayati Girim Yatripatamaham Bande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramanandamado Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. So we'll continue with our discussion on the fifth canto, chapter 24, entitled The Subterranean Heavenly Planets. So we understand that the lower planetary systems made up of Atal, Vital, Sutal, Talatal, Mahatal, Rasatal, and Patal. And they're also known as Bilaswarga. They are lower planetary systems, but there's the amount of opulence is as good as the heavenly planet. So it's called Bilaswarga, lower Swarga. And there's so many descriptions of how the beautiful houses, gates, parks, there's no old age, no disease, there's no fear of death. So lower planetary systems don't necessarily mean a lower amount of sense enjoyment in terms of quality, not a lower quality of life. Actually, there's incredible amount of material opulence. So Bilaswarga refers more to the location, the lower location, than the lower amount of sense gratification. And here, Sukadeva Goswami describes the residents and the qualities of the different planets. And the main goal of these Bilaswarga is material sense gratification. And even then, even in the lower planetary systems, we find that they are devotees. So devotees, we cannot avoid finding devotees. Hare Krishna. Yes. So devotees are everywhere. We cannot avoid finding devotees. And even in these lower planetary systems, which are meant for those who want to enjoy their senses. We find devotees who have all these opulences at their disposal, but they have no attachment to them. So here we've been discussing the residents of Sutala, headed by Bali Maharaj. And we've seen, we've heard about the pastimes of Bali Maharaj over the last few days. And Bali Maharaj is, we see that what attracted Krishna to Bali Maharaj was his surrender, complete surrender. So we understand Bali Maharaj represents the process of Atma Nivedan, the 6 limbs to surrender. Anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam, rakshishi iti vishvaso, guruptite varanam tata, atma nikshepa karpane, sadvida sharanagati. So 6 limbs of Sharanagati, and one of them is Atma Nivedan, completely dedicating oneself to the Lord. And what happens when, so complete surrender, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains in the Sikh Shastakam prayers, the last prayer, Ashri Shiva Padadatam Pinasma. It doesn't matter that Krishna handles me roughly by his embrace, breaks my heart by not being before me. He's completely free to do everything and anything because he is my worshipable Lord unconditionally. So he's surrendered himself to Krishna. And Krishna describes what happens when someone surrenders unto him, the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj. We see, not Dhruva Maharaj, sorry, Durvasa Muni, when he offends Ambarish Maharaj and he goes to Vishnu, and Vishnu says, Aham Bhakta Paradino Yasvantara Iva Dvija Sadhu Bindrista Hidayo Bhakti Bhakta Jana Priya. He says he's completely under the control of my devotee. So when devotee surrenders to Krishna, Krishna himself becomes completely under the control of the devotee. He says, I am not independent. Krishna is supremely independent, but he gives up his independence when his devotees surrender unto him. And those devotees he describes are those who are completely devoid of any material desires, like Bali Maharaj. And again, in that same section, he describes Sadhavo hridayam mayam sadhunam hridayam toham pad anyate na janati naham tebhyo managapi. So this is the pure devotee has only Krishna in his heart because he surrendered to Krishna. And Krishna says, I know no one but my pure devotee. My pure devotee is always, I am in the heart of my pure devotee, and the pure devotee is always in my heart. So the Lord himself becomes surrendered. We see in Bali Maharaj's pastime that the Lord agreed to become his gatekeeper. So the Lord went with him to Sutala to become his gatekeeper and protect him. And there are many examples of how the Lord becomes surrendered to his own devotees. We see in the pastimes of in Mahabharata, where Krishna agreed to be Arjuna's charioteer, which isn't the role of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be controlled by his devotee, to be controlled by anyone, but he agrees to be controlled by his devotee. You see in pastimes of Mother Yashoda as well, how he agreed to come under the control, how he was bound by Mother Yashoda. So Bali Maharaj himself, he explains how this happened. How did Bali Maharaj come to a point where he had no attachments, and how he became fixed in his surrender to Krishna. In the previous verse, he explains about his grandfather Prahlad Maharaj. And how we understand from Prahlad Maharaj's pastimes, when he was offered different benedictions by Lord Nrsimhadev, he declined all these things. He said, no, please do not tempt me with these things. He said, our relationship is not that of a merchant. So he said, if anything, if you want to give me, then just remove all the material desires from the core of my heart. and engage me in the service of your servant, in the service of the servant of the servant. So that was Bali Maharaj, that was Prahlad Maharaj's prayers to Lord Narasimha. And so Bali Maharaj became an exalted devotee because he understood this process of devotional service from his grandfather Prahlad Maharaj. And Prahlad Maharaj himself explains that in the 7th canto, how he wants to perform devotional service, that he wants to perform devotional service and cross the ocean of material existence by following exactly in the footsteps of Lord Brahma and the Pacific succession. So Prahlad Maharaj himself, he says, how did I come to this position of having no material desires? What desire do I have? All I want to do is perform devotional service in the footsteps of Lord Brahma and the previous acharyas. And that's the secret, Prabhupada says. That's the secret of advancement in devotional service. And so that's to accept instructions of the previous acharyas. And we find, so this famous verse from Mahabharata, Tatko Pratishta, Shruteyo Vibindam, Nasa Vishiryasya Matidnaminnam, Dharmasya Tattvam Nihitam Guhayam Mahajanam Yena Kathasapanta. So we understand Tatko Pratishta, that means dry arguments and speculation. It's very difficult to approach the absolute truth by just arguing. And then depending on the ability of the person arguing, one may win sometimes, another person may win sometimes, but you can't find the absolute truth just by these arguments. They're inconclusive. So then someone might say, okay, we can't understand through arguments, then let us read the scriptures. The scriptures is described, they're very variegated. There's so many different scriptures. Muslims will be reading the Quran, we've got the Bible, and within the Vedic tradition, we've got so many different scriptures, the Vedas, the Upanishads. And sometimes things are seemingly contradictory and we get confused. And instead of achieving at the conclusion that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we might come to a conclusion where the absolute truth is impersonal. So even to understand the scriptures is very difficult. We become, especially for a neophyte, we become confused and there's no conclusion. So then we might turn to these philosophers or munis who have given so many commentaries, and we think, okay, maybe we'll approach them to find out what is the absolute truth. But it's described that every muni, they want to differentiate themselves from the other munis, so they have to have some difference in opinion. So it's examples given, like if you're doing a PhD in the university, you have to find a new topic. You can't do the same thing someone else has done. So every muni will have his own little flavor. So then how do you find out what is the absolute truth? So Yudhishthira Maharaj says, the only way to understand the absolute truth is Mahajano Yena Gatasapanta. Follow in the footsteps of the Mahajan. And why? Because he says, because the absolute truth, the secret of bhakti is hidden in the hearts of these Mahajans. Dharmasya Tattvam Nihitam Guhayam Mahajano Yena Gatasapanta. So this science of devotional service is hidden in the hearts of the great devotees. So who is considered a Mahajan? A Mahajan is a great soul. So it's described as the person is as great, he's great when he understands the greatest person, the Supreme Personality of God. To the extent that you understand Krishna, that amount you are. And Yamaraj describes to his followers, the Yamadutas, 12 main Mahajans. Swayambhu Narada Sambhu Kumara Kapilo Man Prahlada Janako Bhishmo Bhalir Vaya Saki Vayam. So the 12 Mahajans, Swayambhu, Lord Brahma, Narada, Shambhu, Narada Muni, Lord Shiva, Prahlad, Janaka, Bhishma, Prahlad Maharaj, Janakadev, Bhishmadev, and then with Kumara, Chatur Kumaras, Kapil Muni, Manu, Bali Maharaj, Sukadev Goswami, and Yamaraj himself. So here it's already two of them are mentioned, Bali Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj. Both of them are considered Maharaj. And not just them, but anyone following in their footsteps considered a Maharaj. And Prabhupada explains that the immediate spiritual master is a direct expansion of Narada Muni. So immediate spiritual master is our Maharaj. We can follow. So we understand that, so these Mahajans, they've got, why is it considered hidden? We understand that pure devotional service is something very rare, something very valuable. So naturally, something very valuable isn't just given out freely, it's hidden. And why is it valuable? We see how Krishna becomes, by pure devotional service, Krishna, it attracts Krishna himself, Krishna Akarshini. And when it binds Krishna, and Krishna himself becomes indebted or bound to serve that devotee. So pure devotional service is very special and has to be hidden because Krishna himself can be purchased by that. And we don't want any unqualified person trying to bind Krishna. So therefore, the pure devotional service is hidden. And so that we understand, again, this pure devotional service is revealed in the heart. It's not something that we can just read. It says, Bhakta Bhagavatam Grayam Nabuddhaya Nachatikaye. You can only understand bhakti from the Bhagavat, the person Bhagavat, the book Bhagavatam, not by the person Bhagavat, not by reading tikas, not by reading so many commentaries on different scriptures, not by our own intelligence. So it's only understood by revelation. It's not something we get out of our own accord. This Yasya Devi Parabhakti Yata Devi Tatagu Kashyati Katitahi Prakashante Mahatmana. It's prakash. It's something that's revealed in the heart. And it's revealed in the heart to the pure devotees. So by following in their footsteps, we can also, by serving them, by developing faith in them and Krishna, then this knowledge gets revealed to us. Again, we see many pastimes in Bhagavatam about this process of following in the footsteps of previous acharyas. You see Dhruva Maharaj and Narada Muni, pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj and Narada Muni, Bali Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj here, Parikshit Maharaj and Sukadev Goswami. There's a verse, considered the sannyas mantra, the Avanti Brahmana, in Canto 11, he describes. So he was a complete materialist at the beginning, and then somehow towards the end of his life, he was forced to take sannyas. Everything was lost, and his family went away. So he ended up taking sannyas, and at that point, he was determined to perform devotional service. And he describes how he was determined, how he was going to perform this devotional service. So you can, Etam sastaya paratmanishtam adhyashitam purvatamer maharishibi aham tarishyami duranta param tamo mukundangri nishevayeva. So he says that he will cross over this aham tarishyami duranta param. It's insurmountable ocean of material existence. It's very, very difficult to cross over. But he says he will cross over by grabbing onto the lotus feet of Krishna. Mukundangri Nishevaya, by serving the lotus feet of Krishna. And how will he do this? He says, Adhyashitam Purva Tamir Maharishibi, according to how the previous acharyas, the rishis, previous acharyas, they did, I will follow in their footsteps and perform this devotional service. And I'll become fixed in Paratmanishtam, fixed in serving the Supreme Personality of God. And in that way, he was determined to cross over this ocean of material existence. So that is our process. We don't have to invent something new. We don't have to imagine things. We don't have to speculate. We just need to follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. We don't have to invent new mantras, new traditions, many things already given. Some things according to time, place, circumstances, we might have to adjust. But otherwise, we know this process works. What the Mahajans have done works because they have Krishna in their heart. They've been able to attract Krishna. So we just follow what they've done, we'll be able to attract Krishna. If we try something new, there's always a risk that it's uncharted territory. Krishna may be attracted, may not. But what the previous acharyas have done definitely works. In the process of following the previous acharyas, there is also a warning that we should not imitate. So there are two words, Anu Karan and Anu Sharan. So following the footsteps is Anu Sharan. The other thing we should avoid is Anu Karan, which is imitating the pure devotees of Lord, or imitating the Mahajans. Prabhupada gives a warning. He says, then there's great risk or danger. And Prabhupada gives an example of how sometimes Sahajiya, as we see, Krishna is dancing with so many gopis, so that they want to imitate, they want to dance with have 100 women around them, and they're dancing all of them. I'm Krishna, dancing with the gopis. And Prabhupada also gives the example of Lord Shiva. If you want to imitate Lord Shiva as a Mahajan, if you want to imitate Lord Shiva and you drink poison, you will end up dead. And then he also gives like the example of Haridas Thakur is chanting 300,000 names of the Lord, living in seclusion. So one thinks, okay, I'll also in a neophyte stage, I'll just go in seclusion, stay somewhere by myself and chant. 300,000, but as much as I can, I'll just keep chanting. It won't, at that stage, it will not be something that's sustainable. After a while, slowly, all the dirty thoughts, everything from our previous conditioning will come into our mind, and then we might just give up the process. Prabhupada will be attacked by material desires. There's that story that's often quoted. There's once a pujari who was conducting a marriage ceremony, and he had an assistant pujari, his understudy. So as he was conducting the marriage ceremony, there was this cat that kept crossing the path. It was distracting. Every time the cat walked by, everyone would look at the cat. So he asked for a basket to be brought, and then he's put the basket on top of the cat, so the cat will just stay in one position, people won't be distracted. And then he conducted the marriage ceremony, and everything went on smoothly. So his understudy, his assistant, he noticed this. He was taking notes of everything that was happening, because the next round he might have to do it. So the next time around, the main pujari wasn't available, so he was called for a wedding. He said, okay, I've seen how my guru did it. I've seen him taking down all the notes. All the paraphernalia was there. He started the wedding ceremony. Then he said, stop, something is missing. So he said, okay, now we need to find a cat, and we need to get a basket. Everyone is confused. Why do you need a cat? He said, that's the procedure we have to do this. So go find a cat and then put a basket on top of the cat. And then we can continue with the wedding ceremony. So that is anukaran, imitating without understanding the principles behind these activities. We see many times like this. Sometimes new persons who join, they become very enthusiastic. They're very inspired by these previous acharyas. And suddenly, within a week or two, they look like Babajis, and this given up everything, just simple cloth, and lots of austerities. And then after a few weeks, they just disappear. You don't see them again. Once I met a person in Singapore. He's a very nice person. When I met him, really, I thought he was a very nice person, very nice qualities. I didn't know he had some mental health issues at that time. But when he took up the process, he took it up very quickly. Within a few weeks, he was chanting, he was all dhotied up and tilak. And then a few months later, we were in Mayapur for the Gol Purnima festival. And then suddenly he turned up there. How did you come? Did you come with some devotees? He said, no, he just heard about it and somehow he had a desire, so he came to Mayapur. And I met him the day he arrived. And the next day in the morning, I saw him. He was just completely disheveled and he looked so disturbed. I said, Prabhu, what's happening? I said, no, Prabhu, I can't stay here anymore. I said, what happened? So he thought, so he was, in his mind, he was thinking, okay, I've come to the Dham. I cannot pass water, can't pass stool, I shouldn't take bath, I shouldn't brush my teeth because I'll spit out, I can't contaminate the Dham. And he had so many different ideas because he had read all sorts of different things. He just looked completely disheveled and very disturbed. Then I said, Prabhu, no, it's okay, you can do all these things, it's fine. And then after that, I think the same afternoon, he took a bus and went back to Kolkata. Didn't really see him after that. But so sometimes, just by start imitating, and then you can't sustain. So like that, we have many examples. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, devotees are trying to imitate like the devotional ecstasies of pure devotees and then getting beaten up. So we've got to be careful not to imitate the Mahajans, but to follow in their footsteps, which means following their instructions, performing devotional service under their guidance. The other part of the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions a very important quality of Bali Maharaj, and a quality that's very important for devotees. And he says Bali Maharaj was, out of great humility, he actually described this. The word he says, Amrajita Kasaya, a person who's materially contaminated. So out of great humility, Bali Maharaj was considering himself to be materially contaminated. And the only way to perform devotional service, we want to describe a Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Trinada Pesunichena, one has to become more humbler than a blade of grass. Only in that state can one perform or chant continuously, you can perform pure devotional service. So Bali Maharaj, when he says persons like us who are still attached to material enjoyment. So he's a pure devotee. Obviously, he's not attached to material enjoyment. He gave up all his material possessions to Krishna. He surrendered everything. We'll discuss in past verses how he did not receive all these material opulences because of his desire. This Krishna just benedicted him with these, but he has no attachment to these material things, even though he's in this heavenly planet. But he's still, so that Prabhupada explains how a pure devotee, advanced Vaishnava, even though he's so elevated, he considers himself, he thinks that everyone else is a devotee, everyone else is bhakti, but except me, I have no good qualities, I have no bhakti. And this is the characteristics of an Uttamadhikari, which is difficult because then as a preacher, you can't preach. If everyone else is a devotee and you're not a devotee, then how can you preach to anyone? Everyone else should be preaching to us. So even though he had such humility in the previous verses, we could say he was not criticizing Lord Indra at Brihaspati, but he was just sort of pointing out. So how to understand that? In one sense, he's extremely humble. He says, I'm full of material desires. I'm not an advanced devotee. But then he's pointing out how Indra was foolish. He had an opportunity to have darshan of Vamanadev, and instead of asking him for something spiritual, he asked him for something material. So Prabhupada explains in many parts how, many different purports, how an Uttamadhikari, in order to preach, he has to take the vision of a Madhyamadhikari. Even though he's a pure devotee, in his heart he doesn't think he's a pure devotee, but in order to preach, he has to come down to the platform, but at least the vision of a Madhyamadhikari. Because a Madhyamadhikari, he deals with different, so he has love for Krishna, he makes friendship with pure devotees, and to the innocent, he tries to be merciful to these innocent persons, and those who are envious of Krishna, he tries to avoid them. So Bali Maharaj, in the previous verses, he was coming down to the vision of a Madhyamadhikari to point out the fault of Indra. It was interesting, he was also finding fault with Brihaspati, which is just, something came to mind. It's very, the behavior of a disciple reflects on the spiritual master. So the disciple is, whether it's something the disciple is making a mistake or doing some wonderful service, both reflects on the spiritual master. And I've seen my own spiritual master, His Holiness Subhaksari Maharaj. Sometimes when someone does something wonderful, he's asking, who is that devotee spiritual master? At the same time, when certain things happen, certain devotees behave in such a way that they're not following proper etiquette. And this question again is, who is that person's spiritual master? And it's like, why is the spiritual master being blamed for the activities of the disciple? But that is something for us to, or at least for myself, to think. So whatever we do, how we act, reflects on the training that we receive from the spiritual master directly, through his chastisement or advice, or through indirectly through our God brothers or during his lectures. There was a side point, so that was the pure devotees, advanced Vaishnavas. That's how they have their vision. In their vision, they think themselves as very low, but for the purpose of preaching, they take the vision of a Madhyamadhikari. And there are, again, many examples of devotees who take up a humble position. I was just remembering Sanatan Goswami, when he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He took a blade of grass between his mouth, offered full obeisances, and then he was telling Chaitanya Mahaprabhu how I've got no good qualities. I was born in a low family. I'm a materialist, and I don't even know who I am, Kayami. And he says, but these people in the village, they think that I am a great devotee. And I'm so foolish that hearing them, actually, I'm thinking I'm a great devotee, but actually, I don't even know who I am. And the Goswamis, you understand, are the most renowned persons, foremost followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but yet he was expressing his humility. And we see in Srila Prabhupada's pastimes as well. It's obviously pure devotee of the Lord and Uttamadhikari, but he's himself, when once he was asked, are you a devotee? He said, no, I'm trying to be a devotee of Srimati Radha. But he didn't say, I'm a pure devotee. He's saying, I'm trying to be a devotee. And whatever he does in his service, he always offers it to his spiritual master. We saw in the Prabhupada Lilamrita how he was saying, under the orders of my spiritual master, I went to the West to preach, and then he came back to India and wanted to build a temple for Shri Radha Ras Bihari. And so another thing I was thinking about, like Srila Prabhupada's humility, he was, again, there's some controversy about this over the years, about Prabhupada referring to disciples as Prabhu, whether it's men or women. And that's, so it's, I think I was, years ago I heard something about how Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada, he would consider all his disciples as his masters. He would consider himself a servant of his disciples. So in Prabhupada's humility, he was calling everyone Prabhu, as everyone's my master. That's his vision. He thinks he's a servant of all his disciples. So greatest devotees, they think themselves unqualified not to be devotees. Then on the other hand, there are us, or at least myself, we're neophyte devotees. But then by just performing devotional service for a while, we tend to develop some pride, and then we think we're devotees. We can tell people, we tend to think of ourselves as devotees, but we're really fast. So the more we progress, the more we develop in devotional service, then the more we realize that actually we're insignificant, we're further away from the goal. And it is easy to get carried away, because as you stay on for a while in the movement, you tend to get some recognition, you get some position, and it's difficult to become humble sometimes. And then, of course, the next question will be, how do we develop this humility? I'm sure we've got many different experiences. But would you like to? Some ways we can develop this humility?
The opposite of humility is pride. And pride means you want others to serve you and glorify you and look at you. So the opposite of that humility is just simply serve others and glorify others and try to help others and just absorb yourself in the service of Guru and Krishna. And that way you're just not thinking about yourself. And then humility naturally develops from that. That's my understanding.
So serving others, always thinking about helping devotees, serving others, serving Guru and Krishna. I think there was one description of humility by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada saying, humility means carrying out the orders of the spiritual master despite personal inconvenience. That's one. So the more we serve devotees, then we become humble. We serve Guru, we take instructions. No one wants to surrender. But when we do, then humility comes. And the other things is practical, offering obeisances to devotees every time we see them. That slowly helps develop. And we address devotees, we call them Prabhu. Again, that sort of helps us subconsciously, even though we might not think of them as master, but so we keep repeating it. And again, associating with pure devotees, the Lord, hearing, and then we realize what pure devotional service is, and they keep drilling into us how insignificant your spirit soul, 1/10,000 part of the hair, puts things in perspective. So just my takeaway points from this particular section were that Mahajano Yena Gatas, following the footsteps of the spiritual master, or the Mahajans, is as Prabhupada explains, the easiest way to success in devotional service. In that way, we can be in any situation. We can be amongst so much opulence and still have no attachment, like Bali Maharaj. And we can go, whether it doesn't matter whether we go to the lower planets, higher heavenly planets, we always remain fixed in serving the lotus feet of Krishna, following the footsteps of the previous acharyas. So we'll stop here and then comments or questions, correction. Not
Thank you for class, Prabhu. So with respect to the guru, I've heard that when he's in the initial phases of developing a relationship with a disciple, he may not give them any direct instructions, because the possibility is that because they haven't been sufficiently trained, they may not follow the instructions, which it obviously has an adverse reaction on them and the guru. I was wondering, as you go on, you kind of want more instructions from the guru. So how do you inspire him to give you that trust that you're willing to take on some instructions and follow them?
If I understand you correctly, the question was, so the guru can only give you as much certain instructions at that particular point, because if he gives you anything more, you might not be able to fulfill it and it becomes aparad. So how do you show your guru that you're able to receive more? That something to that. Yeah. So a few things that come to mind. One is we don't need to tell the guru. The guru knows Krishna's Trikalagnya. The guru is also Trikalagnya. He knows our past. Just looking at us, he knows our past, present, future. And as much as, say, he's given some instructions, as much as we're fulfilling it, then he can give the next. He can only give as much as we can digest. So if we tell him, no, Maharaj, I can digest more, just give us, he knows how much we can digest. So we've digested what he's given so far. So we've fulfilled those instructions and we're doing it nicely. Then he can give the next instruction. So it's not that we have to firstly tell him, but I think he will. Definitely, it's always good to express your heart to the spiritual master and also to tell him what services you have done, not to boast, but to be transparent and tell him, Guru Maharaj, you've told me to do these things, I have done these things. I hope you're pleased. And if the spiritual master is pleased, then the next instruction comes. And if that doesn't come, then that particular instruction, so for one person, the instruction could be just chant 16 rounds, and that's the perfection of his life. That's all he needs to do. We don't have to build a temple, we don't have to become a big preacher. So that's the particular instruction that's given to the disciple. And that's the life and soul. If he gives the next instruction, we take it. If not, what he has given, it's in that instruction, everything is there. You can go back to Godhead just by following that instruction. And that's all we need to do. And if he thinks that we need to do something else, then he'll give the next instruction. But sometimes we want something bigger. We want a simple instruction. We might think someone else is getting some other instruction. Why am I not getting the instruction? But Guru knows the nature, the mentality. And building a temple doesn't necessarily mean that he's a better devotee than. It could even mean that maybe he's got much more passion, so that passion needs to be exhausted. So Guru gives that particular instruction. Whereas another person, he's already exhausted that passion. All he needs to do is chant 16 rounds, chant 64, or chant extra rounds. That's enough for that particular person. There's a few things that came to mind. And of course, then the question comes, what happens after? Because many times it becomes a painful situation where there's a separation between the disciple and the spiritual master. And again, the same question we asked at that particular point, you might not have been able to accept all the other. He might have wanted to give you more, but we weren't able to accept it at that particular point. And now physically he's not present. Then we understand that he can come through many others. He can come through other sadhus. He could speak through dreams. He could speak through his particular place where he's the final resting places. So in many ways he can continue giving instructions to continue elevating us towards going back to God. Any thoughts you had, Prabhu? You might have had some thoughts when you asked the question. Thank you, sir. Hare Krishna. There's nothing else, we'll stop. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Vancha Kalpurubhya Kripa Sindhuvya, Paitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Shri Prabhupada.